Good day. Welcome to a new edition of the Masuk Report. I am Carl Bodner, and it's my pleasure to serve as moderator for this show. As you know, our show provides a roundtable discussion on important public issues. Today's topic is about patriotism. Our three panelists who will be sharing their thoughts and opinions are Samantha Goldfarb, to my immediate right, Sabrina Romansky, to Samantha's right, and Isabella Medeiros on the other side of the table. Our discussion will be driven by four relevant questions. Our first question will be to ask each panelist to tell us what they think makes a patriot. So, Isabella, let's start with you.
I feel like a lot of people have a wide range of opinions on what makes a patriot. For me, a patriot is someone who values other people's opinions as well, and kind of wants to see their vision of America realized or their country realized. So someone who stands up for their beliefs and the beliefs of others, and ultimately has a say in how their country turns out.
Sabrina, what do you think?
I was really interested in that it wasn't what is a patriot, but what makes a patriot, as far as the way your question was worded. And so I was kind of thinking of it and thinking of what is a patriot, because it's kind of where you have to start. And I was thinking there's a lot of kind of things that draw people to their country, and they all kind of stem from just having a strong set of beliefs in general, or when you aren't really afraid to take action in your own beliefs and you kind of dare to think strongly. And I think that stems from education. And so the people that really feel strongly about their country are the people that know a little bit about their country at least, or have some reason to stand for it. And so I think it's important, as far as kind of getting people to like your country, that they kind of know what there is to like, and they have some respect for it, they know the history of it, they identify with it in some way, and they have something to latch onto, to believe in.
Samantha, are you in agreement with these comments, or do you have a thought of your own that you'd like to share?
I think so. I'm listening to the both of you, and I think you guys, at least from what I'm getting, is that you guys have a lot of pride in just a bit. You especially, that I do. But I think part of patriotism, which I think you guys both kind of touched on, is this idea that we love our country and we believe in our country, but we also believe in what our country stands for. But what people, and I think this is part of what's drawing our country a little bit apart, especially since, the election was just a few days ago, the belief in what our country stands for, I think, can be different or at least what we'd like our country to stand for, can be different for different people. So there are some people in this country who would prefer America to stand for white supremacy, for example, and other people would like to see it as a melting pot. I happen to be one of those people, but I think part of patriotism is what you believe your country to be and what you believe your country to be a part of, and just the beliefs that make it up, whether it is or not. So,
But does being a democracy, or an espoused democracy, create a problem for us? Because how do you get a universal or a unilateral sense of patriotism based upon a shared history? I wonder, would we argue that this past election was one of the most patriotic? I'm not sure. Are those people protesting in major cities across the country right now about the president-elect? Yet they probably would argue they are being patriotic. And so it's an interesting term when you try to give it a refined definition. Do you have any thoughts about what I've just said?
I don't think that every patriot has to be unified with themselves to feel patriotic. There's a lot out there kind of to latch onto, like I said. And so there's people that find that they're identifying with the country the strongest by supporting current president, president-elect, whatever it is, or there's also people that think they're kind of latching on to the country's idea of freedom of speech, and they're not very happy. But I do believe that it's not unpatriotic to complain, to let your voice be heard. I think that's just another way. I think anyone there with strong opinions is out there voicing their strong opinions because of their patriotism. And that's kind of important to understand.
So if I'm considering myself to be a patriot or patriotic, I also have to exercise tolerance? Because we may not all agree with what being a patriot is.
I I feel that I'm sorry. I feel that that's something that we definitely should do. Because, like you said, part of what makes America so great is that everybody comes from different backgrounds and different experiences, whether it's because you come from a different country or you come from a different religion. And I think that it's important to voice those opinions because it increases the diversity of the country and makes us able to ask the real questions about the world in general. Like, a lot of countries are unified in their beliefs and don't see the opposite side. We are fortunate enough to have so many people of so many varying opinions in this country that we get to compare it right here in our own country, as opposed to starting wars or starting conflicts with other countries. And I also wanted to add that I think that patriotism isn't just, and it relates back to the point I made before, was that patriotism isn't just thinking that your country is perfect and flawless. It's seeing the flaws that you disagree with, or the things that you disagree with, and being able to take charge and say, I don't think this is right, I think we should change it. And I think that's why democracy is so important.
So if we're going to be democratically, with a small d, patriotic, we have to have a willingness or a willfulness to be patient and understand how important it is to be civil. That the worst thing is to reach out for violence.
You can go ahead if you have something to say.
I'm not sure that I have. I don't know. I think that by saying be patient, like, it's important to understand that there's a difference between being patient and just sitting back. I know people that they've decided they don't have many strong opinions at all, and they'll sit back, and that's not really being patient. And so I'm just trying to think, like, I do believe being patient is nice, and we'd get a little bit farther if we were a little bit patient, as long as we do understand that we have end goals, but other people have different end goals, and yeah, tolerance is a nice thing too.
But we have to be civil as citizens.
Well, because you've got to respect that the people you're arguing against are patriotic too. They also believe in kind of fundamentals of the country, and to fight them for all of their beliefs is fighting the patriotism too, and that's probably not patriotic.
Okay.
Fight the
Anything
belief,
you
not
want
the
to add,
person.
Sam?
I kind of wanted to say, one of the points that I wanted to make from earlier that I think I can connect back to what you guys are saying. I think that I have a more cynical view of, like, kind of what you were saying about how, like, loving what's different about our country is part of being patriotic. And I think that as much as I'd like to believe that tolerance is what makes our country great, I think only some people have it. I wish that tolerance could be what makes our country great, and I think that in the end, that's kind of going to be the goal, or that should be the goal, because it's the right, it's the moral choice, you know what I mean? So to be civil and to be tolerant and to be polite in what we're doing is kind of, I think, the end goal, to be able to be our best self without having to hurt anybody, which should probably be the end goal for humanity, to be honest, as well. But I also think that we're not at a point yet where I think that just, like, sitting back, being patient, waiting, like, that can be as helpful as going out and being proactive. I don't mean, like, start riots, but I do mean that if we don't do anything and we just, like, wait for the world to change, it's not going to.
I think you have a good point there. I think you're all making some very good points. But let's move on to a second question. Many would agree that over the past 4+ years, America, as a social culture, has become increasingly more diverse, while as a political culture, intensely polarized. Sabrina, what do you think?
I was looking into that question earlier, and I do believe that we are getting just more and more diverse and more strongly opinionated. There's fewer people that, like, if you just go out, take a random survey, I believe there's fewer people out there that'll say they don't care or that they don't have an opinion on any given issue. You'll find a lot of people out there that are willing to express beliefs, and they're different. But they're strong too. And I think that's kind of helping polarize people, that there's more beliefs out there, and then you just kind of get stronger and stronger in your beliefs, and you realize that there's certain molds that you don't fit into, or you're more angry. It is polarizing, and I'm not sure whether that's good or bad.
May I add something to that?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that could possibly prove your opinion is that in the recent presidential election, you could see that there was a record voter turnout, which I think proves that there's more and more opinionated people. But there's still, I think, a lot of people who just don't feel like their opinion matters or that their vote counts. And I think that's a big issue, because I don't feel that enough amount of Americans have voiced their opinion so that the election is necessarily weighted correctly.
I agree. I think that when we have a lot of strong opinions, and I think this election especially has caused people to need to pick a side, such as it is, like red versus blue.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if you don't think that your vote counts, you have so much emotional power within you that's trying to find a way to escape. But if you don't think that your vote counts, it's not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
You need some way to exercise it, but if we don't have faith in our democratic system, we're not gonna be able to exercise that in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Do you think a lot of responsibility then rests with us in public schools, and that we have to help develop that political consciousness in our young people?
I don't believe in encouraging a certain political belief. I have some teachers that are very good at staying neutral. I have others that are certainly not, and I think that's frustrating. Like, you need to give students a chance to form their own opinions. I think that's very important. You don't want to realize years later that you don't want to think that your school brainwashed you. That doesn't lead in a good place. But it's very, very important to give students the education, the background, like what did this country start out as, understand where people are coming from. You should never be arguing with someone where you don't at least understand their background to some degree. And so I don't think that it's entirely on schools to give an opinion, but I think it's on schools to help kind of bud an opinion somewhere.
I'd have to agree with that. I think that it is difficult for people to remain unbiased, but the teachers that do ultimately help people flourish more, because oftentimes, especially at our age, we're starting to develop our own opinions, and if your teacher has a different opinion than you, oftentimes you feel at odds with them. And that might not necessarily mean, I'm not saying that they show bias towards you or against you, but it's certainly can feel like that at some points, but I definitely don't think it's just the teacher's responsibility. I think that it's parents as well. When you're a little kid, and I can attest to this because my brother, who's 10, he has very strong opinions about the election, or had strong opinions about the election, and I could tell that they were due to the fact that he was surrounded by people who had certain opinions, including my family. And I tried to be the mediator, because my family does have strong opinions, but I tried as best I could to be the mediator and say, well, why do you think that? And ask him the questions and try and explain things as best I could to a 10-year-old, that certain things, you still have to show respect to people despite varying opinions. So.
Sam, what's your response to that?
I think that that's an awesome thing that you're doing, like encouraging. I think that's actually what the schools should do. Be sure that we're encouraging active thought in how we think and what we're thinking. And I think one of the biggest issues going on with what we were seeing in the election is that political beliefs were crossing over with moral beliefs. So, like, all of a sudden, it's no longer like, do we do trickle down economics or do we, like, give more to the middle class and things will flourish? It's now like, um, the morality of abortion and gay rights and all of these other kinds of things that certain people are really for and certain people are really against. And now we've had like the different types of political parties which have sort of worked in the past. They've been like colored over with the people who follow them, their moral beliefs. So I think what we should really do is teach tolerance and kindness and good morality, being able to like be sure that we can be good people and be kind people no matter what, and then let the political beliefs separate from that. If we all were kind to each other and we all treated each other as we'd like to be treated, maybe we could finally go on our way to being political as we'd like to be instead of having to back up one who we agree with or one we don't.
I think that you're presenting as an argument has a sound basis to it. I think it's going to become more important as we go into your futures to recognize how demographically this country's changing. It's really becoming very, very multiply diverse. And, that is something that's going to take some adjustment on the part of all of us to recognize that. But if we build off these points, I want to ask, would you agree that historically tragedy tends to bond people? All right.
I think I was watching a Lincoln documentary not very long ago. I'm not sure if it was necessarily about Lincoln, but it had the point in there that John Wilkes Booth thought that by assassinating Lincoln, he would be kind of bringing the South together and like reminding them that there's still something to fight for. He thought that by this assassination, it was kind of a good thing. And he was shocked to find out that no, the South was sad and everyone was sad. The whole country was sad. They were mourning together. And it kind of concluded the Civil War in a way that nobody would have necessarily anticipated. It does make sense on paper that that would have caused more divide, but it caused a unity. It was the first president to be murdered, and everyone was sad about that. And so I was thinking about that when I was thinking about that question, that sometimes it's hard to predict how things will turn out, but it does seem to be. Certainly in that's an extreme case, but yeah, tragedy, people mourn for each other. People are good at heart, despite kind of what they think on the outside. You can, maybe Sam and I are polar opposites. I don't think we are, but like we could be. And yet we're still going to mourn over, a death, someone stole the last cookie in the cookie jar. Like we're still going to be sad together. And so I do think that there's an element of that there's unifying power in tragedy.
Well, I will not steal any cookies. That I
Please
promise.
don't be mad.
However, I think, based on your comments, one has to think about 9/11, which I think had a strong bonding effect, but there was kind of an irony to it too, because it led some people to feel they did not have the right to disagree with our initiative to go to war. And, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I looked at your question initially just as acknowledging, yes, there's a power there in tragedy as bonding, but yeah, like to kind of come to terms with it, like you can't, like, sometimes you're just not going to agree with people, and you can pause that for a second and be sad at an outcome, but then to stand back and be like, well, how do we fix this? There's different answers to it's always going to be different answers to that. Like, how do we move forward? And there's going to be different answers. Some people are going to let that tragedy eat them apart. Some people are going to be better at moving on. And I don't know how strong that bonding power is. And I think personally it's always good to have those opinions, even if they are unpopular in a time of tragedy. If you want to move on in a different way than someone else and be respectful. You might be offending someone who's still sad, and that makes it hard, but I think it is still important to hold on to your opinions.
Do either Isabella or Sam, do you have a response to that or something you'd like to add to that? My question would be, does it matter? It doesn't always have to be a political tragedy. It could be social, it could be natural, like a hurricane. You know, we just had Matthew create $35 billion worth of damage, lost homes, lost property, lost lives, all of these things. Do you think that these kinds of events draw out the better nature of us as persons?
I think that we can all relate, no matter like what our opinions are, how we think that we should respond to it. I think everybody can identify with the sadness of an untimely death, or does that, like, we're all engineered to be empathetic. So the death of a child is something that everybody will mourn because anybody would feel the sadness in that. I think that in that case, tragedy then gives us the opportunity to come together and agree on how to do something without like not just like how you were talking about, and you were talking about like the different ways to come at 9/11 in terms of a political standpoint, like how to take on, like, whether to go to war or not to go to war. And I think it gives us an opportunity to say, well, let's come together. We're all feeling the same pain. We're all hurting on the inside. We should come together and find something we all want to do. Like, it gives us that opportunity, but I don't know if we all take that all the time.
Do you think there's any other cases where something tragic happens and it provokes disunity?
I would definitely have to say so, or at least unity against a specific group. So for like 9/11, we did come together as a country, and a lot of people agreed that we needed to go to war. And I think that it was a decision made in haste and anger and sadness, and those decisions might not always be the best for the long-term effect, but you can see why it happens, and it's reasonable and understandable why someone would do something like that, or like an entire country would decide to do something like that. But yeah, that's what
I think, as you indicated, there's that polarization that we spoke about earlier, and that threads through these kinds of events, and it has an impact on all of us because we base a lot of what we believe off of what we feel.
Right.
And that's where becoming more knowledgeable make a difference.
And I mean, when you're talking about disunity, we can look at the example of 9/11 again, and the Islamophobia that came out of that, the fear that some people had when they, like, that psychological need to blame.
Well, let me take us to our last point. For the final question, I'd like to ask, do you think there is a positive or a negative correlation between being a patriot and belief in the American dream? Sam, I want to ask you to start off on that.
Being a patriot and believing in the American dream. I think that the American dream is something that has always carried through with this country. I mean, ever since we were founded newly, I mean, other than the Native Americans who were here before us, the people who came here, secondarily, I suppose, they came here because it was a chance at a different and better life. And so everybody who's come here after that has come to find the ideals that America has stood for in the very beginning, the freedom of religion and the things that the Constitution stands for, like the freedom of speech and the right to a fair trial and things like that. It's supposed to be fair, equal, and a place of progressive thought, and that's, I think, what the American dream really centers on. And like, even when you think about the more concrete idea of the American dream, the white picket fence and the 2.5 children, like, and the nuclear family kind of deal, it all stems from an idea that you could have what you want in America. And I think that believing in those ideals, maybe not that you can get what you want, but that we can be the best that we can be, and we can have what we need as people to have a good democracy and a society, that's patriotic, believing in what we stand for.
I definitely agree with that. I think that the American dream depends on who you ask. So there's the overarching theme of I am in America. I am here because America will provide me with a better life, whether that's through immigration or you were born here. But I find that a lot of people who were born Americans feel that they're entitled to the American dream, whereas immigrants and people who have fought to be here strive and work really hard to achieve that dream. And I think it's important for people who are born here to realize that they were given that ability to do so at birth, and they should take that and work hard to achieve what they want to achieve, rather than sit back and say, well, I should already have these things because I deserve them. I think that it's important to work hard for what you want to see in the country, like I said before, and that includes speaking out against things that you don't agree with, policies that you don't necessarily agree with, or just voting in general. I think those two things are what every American, and educating yourself. Those three things are things that every American should do, whether or not they're an immigrant or a natural-born citizen.
Sabrina, what's your thought about this whole idea of entitlement, assumed rights of what's supposed to be? In the Declaration of Independence, it states we have the natural right to pursue happiness. But are you suggesting, perhaps, Isabella, that people are getting the word pursue out of the picture and just saying we have the right to be happy?
It frustrates me I know it's obviously out there, it frustrates me that people would think that the American dream equals given happiness. You can make your own happiness, that's kind of the point. And different people have different understandings, though, of how to treat the American dream or how to view it. And so I might think I'm working really, really hard, and someone else might be working 10 times harder, and we might come out with different results. Maybe I'm getting more than the person who's working 10 times harder, and they're frustrated. And so it can lead to kind of people that are confused on if the American dream is really alive. And
Very good point.
so there are definitely cases that there are people that work less hard than others and get more, and that frustrates people, and that is probably kind of what you meant by that. Is there a negative connotation there? But I think you can still be patriotic through that. You can still kind of hold on to hope. Don't give up hope here. And so, yeah, I do think it's frustrating for some people.
Well, I think the concept of hope is really essential. I'm so pleased that you brought that up. As long as you have a sense of hope, there's always a willfulness to try a little more. Okay, and that goes hand in hand with what I would say is all equally important, and that is trust. We have to have trust in our history. We have to have trust in ourselves. We have to have trust in our future. And just curious, one thought, Samantha. Do you think the American dream is still alive?
I think that as long as America is around, and as long as success stories continue, and as long as we continue to have a democracy in which the people vote and the people elect who we want, I think we'll always be able to be a shining beacon of come to America, you can get a second chance. I think that's why so many people choose to come to America, have always chosen to come to America ever since the Puritans from back when we learned an A-push. Everybody's come here in order to pursue a better life, a more equal life, and a life with less entitlement and more of a chance for everybody. So I definitely still think that that's alive. I mean, if we look at the people who are fighting now for equality and immigrant rights and people, like the rights of people to basically pursue happiness so that those who think they are entitled to keeping it the same don't get to just keep it that way. I think as long as we continue to be progressive as we were meant to be, and as the Declaration of Independence says, the American dream will live.
Well, I want to tell you that for myself, and I can only speak for myself, I have a lot of hope in the future because of young people like you. And I really do appreciate you sharing your opinions and thoughts. It's time now for us to close off the program. So let me thank Samantha, Sabrina, and Isabella for sharing in this discussion. We hope you all come back again. And we at Masuk Report want to thank you for joining us. We look forward to having you with us in the future broadcasts. Excuse me, losing my voice. Until then, we wish you well.